The title of this presentation is Why You Should Scrap Your Current Hiring System or How to Hire People You Can Trust. By the end of the webinar, you're going to have a good idea of how the Sensible hiring system is different from what most companies are doing now and why it's better. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Jim Patton. I'm not a medical doctor. I earned a doctorate in electrical engineering. I spent 30 years working closely with HR departments in a variety of hiring management roles, and now that I've retired from my regular gig, I'm working in an area that's bugged me my entire career. It's always bothered me that the hiring process is, shall I say, less than efficient. In this video, I want to give you more details about the process I've created that will help you invigorate your company, hire by hire, save you a ton of money, and I think help you sleep a heck of a lot better at night. Here's what you'll learn today. First of all, my promise to you, and I'm pretty sure I'll be able to keep it. That promise is to make you think hard about what you're doing now and whether it makes sense to continue doing it. I predict you're going to change at least one key element of your hiring process based on information you take away today. I hope I can help you more than that, but even if you don't change anything, I'm pretty confident I'm going to make you think about nearly everything you know about the hiring process. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a true story that illustrates several points. The role of the recruiter and the limitations even the best ones face. The difference between a job analysis and a comprehensive job description. Now, I'm going to talk more about job descriptions versus job analyses later, but this story will prepare you for that discussion. The role of HR, especially in the first interview contact. Now, this is a very personal story. It happened to me, and the reason I'm telling it is because it influenced the creation of Sensible Hiring in a major way. It made me realize the faults of our current system. So here's what happened. I was contacted by a professional recruiter to apply for a provost position at a well-known university. I was contacted because of my background in online education, and this university had a need for someone with that experience. Well, I was flattered. I told the recruiter that I wasn't really looking, but that I would certainly listen. One thing led to another, and I started to get excited about the situation. It seemed to me like it was a perfect fit. I could sense that the recruiter agreed, and he thought he had a good prospect. He set up a telephone interview with HR. I spoke with the head of HR, and we were both encouraged about my qualifications, my experience, and my general suitability. An interview trip was arranged. I was impressed by the comprehensive nature of the job description. Unlike many other job descriptions, it was 2 or 3 pages long. I was not, however, surprised by the content. I've seen this job description in one form or another at many universities. When I arrived on site, I began to ask questions. Naturally, I asked about previous provosts. I had done some research, and I learned that 2 provosts had been hired and had left within the last 3 or 4 years. That's certainly a red flag. More telling, each had left to become president at another university. During the interviews, I spoke with someone who would have been my peer at this institution, another member of the executive committee. I began to piece out the real reason why these other provosts had left when he asked me how I would react if the president might step in from time to time or overrule on any particular decision that I might make. I thought it was an odd question. This was one of the last interviews of the day. I didn't even get a chance to speak with the president. He was apparently too busy. At that point, I knew I was toast. Ultimately, I was told I was not a fit. I was devastated because I thought I was the perfect fit. I showed initiative, energy, experience, personality, competence, in short, everything that I thought was needed to succeed in that position. Several months later, I saw that the person who was hired was someone who had worked for the president previously, but at a much lower level position. It became clear to me at that point that the president was looking for a high-level assistant, not a provost. He had been burned by what he thought was the unbridled ambition of his previous 2 provosts, and he wanted someone who would stick with the position for a while and did not have a leaning for greater goals. He did not want someone who presented a vision, showed initiative and ambition. These, however, were the attributes that the recruiter and the HR person were using to evaluate applicants in the initial candidate pool. The search had been ongoing for over a year and had been restarted at least once. So here are the takeaways. Ultimately, they settled on someone they knew, rather than examining a large applicant pool. So it's very likely they threw out several applicants that could have been outstanding in the position if the initial candidates had been assessed using criteria that ultimately only came out in the final interview. The recruiter and HR did not use the correct evaluation criteria. In the initial interviews, they were using evaluation criteria related to the job description, the basic competencies, and the ability to perform the job. That job description, however, did not include what was necessary to actually succeed in the position. They had not done a complete job analysis, which would have involved interviewing people who reported to the president and had insight as to what was really needed. The people who knew what was needed to succeed only saw applicants in the final candidate pool. The real criteria for success, which included an ability to relate to the president in a particular way, was not communicated to HR and certainly not to the recruiter. If it had been, an assessment could have been created to identify candidates with the particular attributes necessary to succeed in the position. The official job description, even a comprehensive job description, would not have included vital information because vital information may have been awkward to include in an internal company communication. It would have been best handled through an entirely private conversation between a third party and key members of the executive team. If this had been done, it's not likely that I would have even been invited to an interview. And to be honest, that would have been better for everyone. All right, if you're still with me, let's talk about sensible hiring. What is this new process I'm talking about? The first thing to notice about these process phases is that they don't look a lot different from what you would normally expect in a conventional hiring process. The uniqueness will become clear as I explain each one. Job analysis. Right now I'm just going to mention these items, but I'm going to go into more detail in a minute. The job analysis is substantially different from the current way things are done and is, I believe, the most important foundational phase of this process. Advertising and recruitment is something hardly anyone talks about. Social media is all the rage these days, but there are a lot of people who are very qualified to perform your job that just aren't into social media. If they are, you might want to make sure they're not image makers rather than job performers. Advertising and hardcore recruiting are still the key to attracting passive candidates, and we'll talk about that. Initial information gathering. This one is so different from what you're used to that I am aware I have to do a really good job of explaining it. Basically, you have to treat each applicant in the initial candidate pool as if they were in the final candidate pool. Technology will help us do that. Online interviewing. Online interviewing is becoming more and more popular, but most companies are not really using the information they gather to maximum advantage. I'll talk about the easy and free tools available to make best use of the information you gather and also keep you out of legal trouble. Reference validation. The ways most companies gather reference information is such a disappointment to me. Remember, I mentioned that 50 years ago the most important evidence of your potential value to an employer was a reference letter? The value of that information has not decreased, but most companies use it less and less for a variety of reasons we'll talk about. All right, job analysis. The first hiring process phase is the job analysis. The closest thing we can compare this to in a conventional hiring process is a job description. Think about what you do when somebody leaves or when you need to get a job description. The first thing you do is go to the file to see if someone has made one before, right? Then you take that job description and edit it, updating it as you think you need to. You also might go to a job board and look up similar jobs offered by your competition. Then you take some of that language and fashion a new job description, showing a brief description of the duties, responsibilities, and qualifications needed. You post it on a job board, and you wait for the applications to come pouring in. Maybe. Well, a job analysis is more involved than just creating a job description. It's probably better described as a job analysis report, because the end goal is to describe exactly what's needed for someone to succeed in that position. It lists what that person does on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. It explains who reports to this position and who the position reports to. It explains the attributes or personality of a person who is most likely to succeed. It describes the basic competencies needed. In short, it explains exactly what the job is. And how do you get that? The primary means of getting this information is to interview subordinates, coworkers, and superiors. There's a bit of an art to this, however, because many of these people are not used to being asked for this kind of information, and they're suspicious. They question what management is going to do with this information and whether their own jobs might be in jeopardy. The interview must be carefully designed to draw out the information needed, and I'll show you how to do it. This job analysis can be used to write a job description, but it's useful for a lot more. For one thing, you can use it to inform internal staff about the position. Imagine if you had a good job analysis for every position in your company, and if your employees were able to see what position they might aspire to, or maybe what position would be more in tune with their interests and goals. Think how much easier job performance evaluation would be. All of this is much more conducive to a happier workforce. We also use the job analysis to design the applicant assessment survey. In fact, that is one of the main reasons for doing it. The assessment survey, as we'll discuss, is the first tool used to gather information about applicants. Advertising and recruitment. What you are probably used to doing is posting a job description on a job board or putting it in a newspaper or trade magazine ad. The problem with this is that it does not attract the attention of people who are not looking for the job. That is, your passive job seekers. These are people who will become interested in the job once they know about it, but they're not motivated to actively seek it out on their own. You have to catch their attention. You have to attract these people in the same way you advertise any product you want to sell. You use exactly the same kind of market research methods and techniques you would use to sell widgets. You look at your competition, see what they're doing, where they're advertising, what works for them, and how long they've been using a particular media vehicle. Basically, you need to figure out where your applicants live in the media universe and grab their attention. I thought this graphic was very telling. It pretty much confirms what most people's intuition is about how jobs have been filled in the past. It shows there is no one dominant source for finding employees. The large number of positions filled by internal candidates tells me that people who know the company, its culture, and the people are valued. The sensible hiring system further promotes that thinking. The number coming from job boards shows that only 19% of posted jobs are filled by people applying via the posting. That might indicate your posting is attracting a lot of applicants who are being filtered out based on their resumes, including a fair number of qualified candidates. The assessment filters we apply will do a much better job of handling the potentially large number of applicants from this source. Employee referrals are those passive candidates that aren't looking for you, but they need to be intrigued by your message and the possibility of working in a place that will make them happier than where they are now. The fact that these passive candidates are coming from employee referrals is a problem, because basically there aren't that many people that your current employees can refer. You need a way of finding and attracting these people that yields more candidates. The fact that a fair number of applicants are directly sourced from your website indicates you have the opportunity and need to show these folks how you're different and why it's actually worth their time to apply to your positions. It's interesting to see how few people are actually placed via social media. But this data is from 2011, and that could be changing. I think it's especially interesting to note that internet advertising doesn't even show up in these statistics. That situation is changing rapidly, however. You must take advantage of all of these sources to put out a unique message that says you're different, that you think about hiring differently, and that you have implemented a totally new way of thinking about how people should be hired and how they should think about their work. You're going to send people to your website to learn about how you're different. One of the best places for locating these people and doing market research around reaching applicants is Facebook. The idea is to use Facebook to test your campaigns. And when you're satisfied you've got the right message, format, and platform, you can spend a little more money either advertising, using direct mail to put your message in front of exactly the applicant you want to attract, or use some other more focused social media platform like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not the best for demographic research, but it works well once you've done your testing. The Sensible Hiring job application gathering task is quite a bit different from what you're used to. Instead of asking for resumes and cover letters, you should ask applicants to respond to an assessment survey, which is created using information from the job analysis. Some of the best companies are beginning to understand that pieces of paper like resumes, diplomas, and certificates don't necessarily indicate the value of a candidate. They're looking for other assessment metrics. Here's an example talking about the increasing popularity of MOOCs, massively open online courses, which are generally free for students to take. If they're free, you might wonder how the companies offering these courses make money, right? Well, they make money by offering inexpensive certification to students who want to have some official record of their achievement to show companies. The MOOC providers sell their information about who has succeeded in their courses to companies who want to hire students who show aptitude for the very specific areas covered by the courses. While Google has famously begun deprioritizing the role of a college degree in the hiring process, if a student took a Stanford College course in an OEA-recognized subject, Google might give it more weight in an interview. OEA is the Open Education Alliance, and there are a few other companies listed here that are also interested in student achievements outside college. The point here is that companies are increasingly looking for assessment metrics outside a resume, degree, or diploma. The purpose of your assessment survey should be to determine the candidate's suitability based on questions that are closely related to the job and what's needed to succeed in that job. These are not psychometric tests that tell if someone is introverted or extroverted. These are assessments which get at all the factors you've identified in the job analysis that will determine if someone will be successful at a very specific job. So what happens to the resume and cover letter? Well, you still gather it, but you use it more as a checklist than as a direct indicator of the candidate's value. The online interview. Well, this isn't new, so what's new that I'm offering? The important thing to recognize here is that the really valuable interview questions are usually asked by the search committee or hiring manager in the final interview, not the initial interview. This is when you're really trying to figure out whether one of the final candidates will work out. The search committee and hiring manager try to imagine what it will really be like actually working with this person. They try to get to know the person. The difficulty is, even though it would be nice to get this kind of information early in the process, it takes a lot of time and effort to gain that kind of knowledge of a particular candidate. Neither the search committee nor the hiring manager have the time to give that kind of scrutiny to dozens of candidates. So the online interviewing technique that I favor is to use rubrics that represent deep and probing questions. Now, you may not have heard of a rubric, but it's a scale that associates various criteria to a number. An applicant's response to a question is based on various criteria you define in the job analysis. So, for example, maybe you're giving the quality rating of a car a score of 10, 9, 8, 7, etc., based on the number and type of features you've previously defined. It translates that qualitative information, the features, into quantitative information you can use to represent value. So you ask third-party interviewers to grade candidate interview responses based on the rubrics. All of the candidate responses are graded, and the audio response of each candidate is also recorded. The search committee or hiring manager looks at the top graded responses and listens to those top scoring responses at any point in the hiring process. They don't have to listen to dozens of candidates, but they do have the option of listening to the responses of the top scoring candidates, or maybe some who score high on a particular question of interest to them, but not others. Reference validation of candidates. You know, I've written a lot of reference letters, and it's always bothered me that it seemed to me that my creativity really determined a good reference letter rather than the outstanding qualities of the candidate. Usually I was given no guidance in writing the reference letter. It was up to me to determine how much I wanted to praise the candidate or otherwise. If a company was looking for specific information, they usually didn't tell me. So I often got the idea that my opinion didn't really matter that much. Well, nothing can be further from the truth. But some references don't cooperate, and this is why. First, out of concern, they may be held liable if the candidate doesn't work out and they've given a positive recommendation. For this reason, many companies don't even allow their managers to give references for former employees. The easy solution to this is to make sure their contributions are anonymous, but valid. It requires a third party between the applicant and the company who's responsible for managing the reference gathering process. Sensible hiring provides a vehicle for guaranteeing this anonymity. Another reason they don't cooperate is the lack of structure in the reference information requested. In other words, they don't know what to write. Or if, in some cases where they are specific about the information they request doesn't relate in any way to the relationship between the reference and the job applicant. So maybe the reference is a character reference, right? But the company is asking for comments directly related to the job, not necessarily a character reference. Point is, you have to give the reference very specific instructions and allow them to indicate to you the context in which they're giving their comments. If at any time they feel like they're being asked irrelevant information, you've wasted their time and yours. Okay, you've been watching this webinar for a while now. I think you'll agree with me. There are big problems with the current hiring system, and your goal of obtaining a more stable, reliable workforce, hire by hire, promotion by promotion, is critical. It is critical that we move past the evaluation of future employees as great self-image makers and promoters to the evaluation of future employees as excellent job performers. Hire great job performers, not great self-image makers / promoters. I encourage you to think about what your company would look like a few years from now if you implemented even some of the changes I've described so far. You'll have a group of employees who know what their job is, know what other jobs are that are within their reach, know that they are ideally suited for what they're doing, and if that's not true, it becomes very obvious to both you and other managers. The ideal situation is when you have a group of people ideally suited to their jobs, doing work that make them and you proud. I'd like to talk about all the things I can offer you, all the tasks we'll tackle together. First, there will be a video training course with 5 modules covering each phase of this hiring system. Let's go through these tasks briefly, just to give you an idea of the scope of the effort. Job analysis. First thing, create orientation video for hiring team members. As I said, this hiring system is a new way of doing things, and it'll take some orientation, not only on the part of job applicants, but on the part of your employees as well. They're going to be a little suspicious about this activity. In particular, since we're going to be interviewing people in your company to create a job analysis, they need to know what's going on. Identify the JA team, the job analysis team. We need to identify the members of the job analysis interview group. It's not going to take a lot of interviews, maybe 3 or 4, but it's important to identify the right people. Schedule team interviews. This is not a difficult task, but it takes some time and coordination. It also takes visible commitment from the top to get the team to cooperate. Develop assessment survey template. Creating the template means you have to learn about the assessment survey tool we're going to be using. And here's where that training takes place. Create the JA membership website. You need a place to gather the input from the job analysis team. It needs to be password protected with an ability to upload and download documents. Interview the JA team and develop the survey. This requires gathering all of the feedback from the job analysis team, putting it together into a meaningful assessment survey. Create the reference form survey. All right, using the job analysis, the reference form assessment survey is created here. Define weighting factors. Well, not all of your assessment questions are going to be equally important, so you have to prioritize them. And when you do that using weighting factors, that requires some judgment. Advertising. First, relate the job analysis to a demographic. You have to identify who is your target hiring pool. Investigate direct buy media. We need to figure out which media they're involved with. Basically, where do they live on the web? Analyze competitor campaigns. We need to find out where your competitors are advertising and what's working for them. Design campaign and tracking strategy. We need to figure out your split test ads. We need to decide how you're going to track responses. Create landing pages. We need to create the pages where applicants will learn how this process works and why they should be interested. Manage the campaign. We need to track the campaign to see how it's working. All right, the applicant data gathering phase. First, again, we need to create a company video for applicant briefing. You have to introduce applicants to this new hiring process. You have to win them over and convince them that you're different. Contact applicants with instructions to provide assessment form data. Basically, we need to contact them about how to get to the assessment form. The first stage ranking report is created and distributed. Now, this is the first filter applied to your candidate database. Notice that we haven't even asked yet for resume and cover letter information. Online interviewing. Candidates are contacted to schedule an online interview and submit resume or reference contact information from a contact information form. An assessment rubric is designed and approved. We have to have a consistent way of evaluating the interview responses. Interviews are conducted. At this point, we also record the audio or video responses. Interview recordings are cataloged. We'll organize the responses for easy retrieval and later review. The second stage ranking report is created and distributed. Now, this is the second filter that we apply to the applicant database. Reference checking. The reference form survey is launched. At this point, we gather reference information. Candidates are directed to reference response prediction. It's important that we see how in tune candidates are with their references, and we do that by asking the candidate to predict the responses that their references are going to give about them. References are emailed. We direct them to the assessment site. Follow-up phone calls are scheduled. Reference response surveys are gathered. The third stage ranking report is created. Now, this is the final filter before a final candidate pool is selected. Not all of these tasks may apply to your particular situation, so I want to work with you for free to develop a customized plan which makes the most sense for you. Maybe you'd like to start out with one phase and see how it goes. I'm thinking of a phone meeting with some screen sharing that will take about an hour to make sure we agree on a sensible hiring plan that is just right for your company. Now, this may or may not be for you, but what have you got to lose by spending an hour with me talking about your situation and what might help you the most? We can talk about your specific needs and develop a customized solution. Why am I providing this free consultation? Well, I want to make sure this system works for you. I don't want to offer a standardized package that doesn't quite fit the bill or that misses the mark completely. We can decide what makes most sense for you. what to emphasize, what to pay special attention to. At the end of this consultation, one of a couple of things will happen. You love the plan, you decide to go for it on your own. Well, that's okay. As I say, I am really interested in changing the culture of hiring, and if for some reason you're not interested in working with me, but you do like some of these ideas, I want you to run with them. The next thing that could happen is that you like the plan and you ask me to personally help you manage, execute, optimize, and profit from the plan we work out together. Here's how it will work. First, I will ask you to answer a few questions on a survey form. These are not difficult questions and won't take you more than 15 minutes. Basically, I'm interested in how big your company is, how many employees you've hired recently, and how fast you're growing. Essentially, I'm trying to determine if you have a hiring problem I can help you with, or if there are other factors associated with your company or your situation we should consider. We'll schedule a phone meeting. We'll talk about what you're doing, what you want to achieve going forward, and how to reach your goals using well-defined tasks. We'll decide what makes most sense for you and your company. You'll receive this material as an individualized coaching course. That is, I'm going to teach you the material, either you or your staff, on your schedule. We'll schedule meetings where we check progress and plan project tasks. I will be responsible for some of these tasks. Now, this takes a fair amount of my time, but it will be devoted exclusively to you. How much will it cost? Well, it might cost on the order of $2,000 per phase. That's kind of a ballpark figure just to get you an order of magnitude estimate. But the actual amount will depend heavily on what we decide you need. You will always know in advance exactly how much it's going to cost. During our consultation, we'll go through a detailed task list for whatever aspect of this project interests you, any or all of the project phases. We'll schedule the whole process, or we'll just schedule a portion to see how it works for you. The job analysis process is the foundation of this system and is likely to be the highest priority. Here's what you should do. Fill out a simple one-page application. Respond to an email asking for a time to connect via phone. Please note, this is not for everybody, and that's why I have this application process. I'm going to be rather selective about who I work with. I'm keeping the price low so that I will have more applications and the flexibility to be selective. I really want to make sure this system will work for you. After you become a client, this is what's going to happen. We'll immediately schedule a follow-up call. We'll arrange for phone meetings every 2 weeks, depending on our progress, until we get through the entire program, or whatever makes sense. We'll do this pretty much on your schedule, but I would not want the entire program to last more than a couple of months. Just to reiterate, I'll work with you and your staff to organize and manage the campaign with regular progress meetings, produce videos explaining the system to employees, applicants, and references, work with job analysis groups, determine job advertising plans, arrange and conduct online interviews, set up a dedicated server or use your current system, install and teach software tools we're going to need, collect and analyze the results. I will be in constant communication with you and your staff. The free planning and strategy conversations will be arranged on a first-come, first-served basis. Again, when my schedule fills up, I will take everything down and won't reopen until I have more spots. What makes sense for your situation? A large commitment to a single HR services company with an inflexible product and staff? I'm offering you a very individualized, customized solution that you can modify to your heart's content. And think for a minute. What is your comfort level with what you're now spending and getting? Basically, what I'm getting at here is how much do you want to be locked into another company and their system as opposed to having your own system that you can confidently modify as you wish? To what extent are you now in control of your hiring process and the personnel direction of your company? I want you to think about just who is controlling the process now. That's what it really boils down to. Who has control over the most important resource in your company? Your people. Thank you for listening, and I hope to speak with you again.